Hey guys, tonight we slip back into the candlelit stillness of colonial America, where the silence is not peaceful, it's just eerie. You step outside your creaky wooden cabin, and all you can hear is the wind sneaking through the trees and the muffled clatter of a loose shutter. There are no headlights, no buzz of street lamps, not even the distant hum of a fridge. Just you, your breath, and maybe something moving out by the barn. You blink into the darkness, and it hits you. This is bedtime, 1682 style. There's no scrolling your phone under the blanket, no white noise machine to drown out creaky floorboards. Just firelight and paranoia. And no, you probably won't survive this era without at least one unpleasant encounter with a raccoon the size of a toddler. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how far and wide this sleepy little journey stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across uneven dirt, past sleepy homes, their windows flickering with the last breaths of candlelight. It's early evening by modern standards, maybe 7:30, but in colonial New England, that's bedtime. The sun set an hour ago, and without artificial light, there's not much reason to stay up, unless you're the suspicious kind. And let's be honest, everyone was a little suspicious. You catch the scent of smoke, wet firewood and pine pitch. It's everywhere, clinging to your clothes, your hair. Every home has a hearth, but keeping it burning safely through the night is a whole lifestyle. Fires are both lifeblood and death traps. One rogue ember, and your whole block of thatched roofs and timber frames could become the colonial version of toast. You step over something soft in the road, a bundle of straw. A cat? Hard to tell. And no, you don't have a lantern. Those are for the rich. You're relying on moonlight, and when there's no moon, well, good luck. Most folks are inside, saying their prayers or already nestled under layers of wool and linen. But nestled is generous. Beds are small, lumpy, and crowded. Entire families, parents, kids, even apprentices, often sleep in one room, if not one bed. Yes, even the teenager who insists they're basically an adult. And no one's sleeping straight through the night. Not in this era. This is the golden age of segmented sleep. Two distinct sleep phases with a first sleep around dusk and a second sleep closer to dawn. Between the two, you're awake for an hour or two, doing light chores, praying, even visiting neighbors. Because apparently, no one invented just go back to sleep yet. You creep closer to the town square. There's movement, a flicker of flame, a rustle of heavy coats. Two men with pikes and long capes cross paths, exchanging gruff nods. The night watch. Local volunteers tasked with patrolling the darkness. They're not police, not really. More like neighborhood dads with weapons and time to kill. Sometimes they're enthusiastic. Sometimes they fall asleep in a haystack. Historians still argue whether the early watches actually prevented crime or just made nervous townsfolk feel better. What's clear is that people were terrified of the dark, not just because of criminals, but because of what they believed lurked just beyond the edge of the firelight. You think of ghosts, demons, wild animals, and honestly, one of the bigger threats. Drunk farmers. A respectable man stumbling around after dark might be your uncle, or he might be stealing chickens. Or both. You duck under a sagging sign outside the tavern. They closed at sunset, but a soft hum comes from within, someone's still singing. Late night drinking is frowned upon, officially. But this is America, even colonial America, and rules were made to be flexed after 2 pints of hard cider. As you pass, a gust of cold air makes you shiver. Windows are shuttered tight, doors barred. People don't take chances at night, not with bandits, wolves, or, fringe fact incoming, escaped pigs. Yes, wild pigs were a genuine menace. They rooted through trash, destroyed gardens, and occasionally chased children. Colonial records mention them like mini horror movie villains. One town even had an ordinance about swine of unruly temperament. That's not a phrase you want in your bedtime story. The stars above are impossibly bright. No light pollution, just the Milky Way smeared across the sky like spilt sugar. It's beautiful, yes, but also, sort of accusatory. Like the heavens are watching. And in a deeply religious colony, that's not poetic, it's terrifying. You remember you forgot to check the hearth back home. Did you bank the embers right? Are they safe under the ashes? Or will you return to a smoking ruin and a very smug neighbor with a bucket? You move faster. The night isn't dangerous in the cinematic way, not like swords and duels. It's dangerous in the quiet way. The kind where a wrong step on a rotten plank might mean a broken leg, infection, and a very short remaining lifespan. You spot a figure ahead, just a flash of movement. Is it a neighbor? A thief? A witch? You laugh. But only a little. Because in 1692, someone would definitely accuse that silhouette of sorcery, and you might be called to testify. You pass a house where the curtains flutter, and you hear whispering. It's hard to say if it's a romantic tryst, a family argument, or someone reciting psalms because they're convinced Satan is outside. All valid options. The night smells of damp leaves and horse sweat. There's a low croaking from the woods, frogs. A haunting chorus that might as well be ghosts if your imagination's still active. You take a moment, breathe in the chill. Somewhere deep in the trees, an owl calls out. And just beyond that, the distant clink of a bell. The night watch, marking the hour. Another sound to hold the fear at bay. As you turn toward home, you glance up again. That sky. Those stars. It's hard to believe people live their entire lives by moonlight and fire. You feel it in your bones, that strange blend of awe and unease. The dark used to mean something. It was thick with rules and rituals. And very few people ever truly slept through it. You slip through the front door of your little wooden home, careful not to let it creak too loudly. Everyone's already in bed, or at least in the bed area. There's no such thing as bedrooms for most colonists. It's one big shared sleep pile, and yes, someone's probably snoring already. Welcome to the midnight hour of 1690s domestic life, where personal space is more of a theory than a practice. But here's the weird part, you're not settling in for the night. Not really. Because in this era, sleep comes in two parts, first sleep and second sleep. That's right, you're only halfway through your nightly journey, and this in-between zone is oddly productive. You fumble through the room quietly. A few embers glow in the hearth, casting long shadows against the wall. Someone, probably your mother or an aunt, is already awake, kneeling by the fire to warm a pot of something vaguely porridge adjacent. That's because between sleeps, people read, prayed, chatted, sometimes even visited neighbors. Yes, social calls at 2 a.m. were totally normal. Forget Netflix and insomnia scrolling, this was the golden age of post-midnight productivity. You tiptoe past the bed, careful not to step on the youngest child, who somehow sleeps like a drunk starfish. You settle on a stool by the fire, listening to the soft creak of the house adjusting to the night. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, and something howls faintly. A dog. Hopefully. Here's your mainstream historical fact, early Americans genuinely believed segmented sleep was healthier and spiritually significant. Sleep manuals and sermons talked about it like it was God's intended rhythm. That first sleep was a deep, sacred rest, perfect for cleansing the soul. The in-between time was a reflective bonus round. Then came second sleep, a gentler doze until sunrise. Historians still argue whether this pattern was biological or simply a byproduct of living in a pre-industrial world. Without clocks, electricity, or strict work hours, people just followed their bodies and the firelight. Once artificial lighting arrived, the two-sleep habit mostly faded. Which is a shame, because that 2 a.m. prayer snack combo. Underrated. The room smells like ash, wool, and dried apples. Someone stirs a pot, maybe warming leftover stew or milk with herbs. If you're lucky, you'll get a bite of bread smeared with bear grease. Yes, that was a real thing. Tastes fine. Like candle wax and commitment. You notice your father murmuring scripture under his breath. It's quiet, almost trance-like. Religion seeps into every moment of the day, but especially this one. Midnight is sacred. Vulnerable. Some believed it was when God spoke clearest, and when the devil crept in. You're not sure which one you're hoping for. You wrap a shawl tighter around your shoulders and glance toward the window. The moonlight filters in through the cracks, illuminating dust motes and the silhouette of your older brother's hair sticking up at a mathematically impossible angle. He'll deny it later. Your neighbor, old Mrs. Thatcher, once told you she spends her mid-sleep hours sewing and whispering psalms. She says the silence makes her feel like she's the only person alive, and that's comforting. Honestly, she might just enjoy the peace and the chance to fix her husband's socks without hearing him complain. Not everyone used their wakeful hours wisely, though. Some colonists took this opportunity to snoop. Secret letters were written. Affairs were rumored. And one fringe tidbit. Mid-sleep was apparently a prime time for fertility rituals. That's right, some guides claimed the best time to conceive was between sleeps. Nature's awkward scheduling. You stifle a yawn and poke the embers. They're still warm, flickering orange and gold, a soft pulse in the dark. You think about how weird this would feel in modern life. Imagine telling your boss you're late because your first sleep ran long. HR would not be amused. The home creaks again, and you glance at the loft above. That's where the unmarried boys sleep, away from the rest. You swear you saw one of them sneak out earlier. He'll claim he was checking the livestock, but if there's a girl involved, he's checking more than hooves. You settle back against the wall. The fire's heat is gentle, almost hypnotic. You let your eyes wander the room. A musket hangs above the hearth. A line of drying herbs dangles from the ceiling, sage, thyme, maybe something stronger. Herbal remedies and witchcraft are suspiciously close in the colonial mindset. Your little sister stirs, rolls over, and mumbles something about bread. You feel that in your soul. Outside, you hear it again, that distant bell. The town watch, still doing their rounds. Calling out the hour like human grandfather clocks, 2 o'clock and all is well. It's oddly comforting. Or it would be, if you didn't know the watchmen are half asleep themselves and probably arguing over who stole whose tobacco ration. You wonder if you should try to sleep again. But there's something peaceful about this hush. No rush. No expectation. Just time, unclaimed and ancient. You think about how this sleep cycle disappeared. When gaslight and, later, electric bulbs stretched the day artificially, people consolidated their nights. No more long, sacred pauses. Just one big gulp of sleep, often restless and rushed. You feel like you're part of something older, slower. And you wonder if they had fewer nightmares. Because even if you feared witches or fires, there was something rhythmically satisfying about surrendering to the dark in chapters. A log shifts in the fire. Sparks lift and vanish like fireflies. You sigh, pull the shawl closer, and let your head tilt slightly forward. Around you, the others begin to stir again. This is the signal. Time to ease back into your second sleep. You stretch out on the hard mat beside the hearth. Someone farts gently in their sleep. You say a silent prayer for endurance. The fire dies down to a steady glow. Outside, the stars hold steady, watching. Sleep doesn't come all at once, but that's okay. It'll arrive. In this era, you don't rush it. You drift there like a canoe on still water. The sun is barely hinting at the horizon when the sounds of early morning creep into the room, feet shuffling over floorboards, spoons clinking, the soft grunt of someone stretching after a cramped night on a shared mattress. You blink yourself awake from your second sleep, limbs stiff from the cold, dreams half remembered, and mouth dry from breathing in a room warmed only by last night's embers. No alarms needed. The rhythm of the household is enough. This is the pre-coffee era, so people don't bounce out of bed. They kind of roll into the day, creaking like the floorboards beneath them. Your uncle is already outside feeding the chickens, and someone's coughing like they just smoked a pine cone. You groggily splash icy water on your face from a basin. It does not refresh you. It slaps you awake like an 18th century reality check. Soap is rare and often smells like boiled animal fat. That's because it is boiled animal fat, mixed with lie and optimism. Outside, a fog hugs the ground. It's chilly, and your breath ghosts out in little puffs. The streets are quiet, but not for long. Morning means the end of the night watch, and with it comes the unspoken baton pass of responsibility, from the armed, sleep-deprived guardians of darkness to the busy, bleary-eyed caretakers of daylight. You pass one of the watchmen just as he's finishing his round. His eyes are puffy, beard uneven, and he's muttering something about that blasted cow again. He gives you a nod that says, yes, I kept the monsters at bay for another night, and no, I'm not okay. And here's your mainstream historical fact: town watches were often volunteer-based or assigned through civic duty. In many towns, if you were male, healthy, and unlucky, your name would be drawn in a rotation. This wasn't a prestigious role, it was often seen as a tedious, thankless task. A colonial version of jury duty, but colder. You stop at the edge of the commons. There, the changing of the guard is happening, if guard means a rotating collection of reluctant farmers, aging veterans, and teenagers trying to look tough in oversized coats. One man hands off a lantern that's nearly out, and the next shrugs like, it's almost dawn anyway. What's fascinating is how informal the entire thing is. There's no standardized training, no uniforms, and, surprise, no pay in many places. Some towns offered small tokens, maybe a few coins or a ration of rum. Others relied entirely on guilt and peer pressure. What, you don't care if your neighbors are murdered in their beds? But even in this chaos, the system had its quirks. One fringe tidbit. Watchmen sometimes used rattle drums or wooden clappers to make noise as they walked, both to alert criminals and reassure residents they were nearby. Yes, that means these guys deliberately stomped and clacked their way through town like colonial maracas, just to remind you they still existed. Historians still argue whether these noisy patrols actually deterred crime or just kept everyone slightly more anxious. After all, if you heard nothing, maybe the watch was slacking, or maybe something had silenced them. Either way, sleep tight. The town crier, often the same guy or at least his cousin, is out now too, announcing the day's news with a bell and the vocal energy of a man who had 2 hours of sleep and an argument with a goat. You trudge along a muddy lane, sidestepping frozen puddles. The homes here are small and tightly packed, their chimneys puffing like sleepy dragons. You pass a few neighbors, wrapped in cloaks and suspicion. Everyone nods, but no one really talks yet. You're all still mentally booting up. Someone's already complaining about footprints in their garden. Another's swearing under their breath about a missing milk pail. And someone's loudly warning that the Miller boy's been out after hours again. The town may sleep in 2 shifts, but the gossip cycle runs 24/7. You round a corner and see what looks like the remnants of last night's watch notes, chalk scribbles on a board nailed to a tree. A simple list: 12 o'clock, all quiet. 1 o'clock, pig in street. 2 o'clock, Widow Harris pacing again. Yes, these notes weren't just functional, they were delightfully nosy. That's because the night watch wasn't only about catching thieves. It was about watching everything. Fires, animals, suspicious movement, even wandering spouses. Your business, after dark, was everyone's business. It's why many early settlers felt exposed at night, even when locked indoors. The town watch saw all. and remembered most. Which made them either the protectors of peace, or the nosiest neighbors imaginable. You make your way toward the meeting house, the town's multipurpose building for everything from worship to public punishment. It looms like a gray wooden barn with judgment issues. Sometimes, watchmen ended their shift here, reporting strange behavior or lost livestock. Other times, they simply fell asleep on the steps. Inside, a few early risers gather around a long table. The air smells like smoke, paper, and wool. There's talk of the weather, the harvest, and whether someone should go knock on Widow Harris's door, because yes, she was pacing again last night, and no one knows why. Is she possessed? Grieving? Bored? All valid theories. This was life in colonial towns, constant observation, constant speculation, and a lot of barefoot walking in the dark. The meeting breaks up, and you head home again. The town is waking now. Chickens cluck. Doors open. Someone somewhere is yelling at a goat. The night watch may be over, but its imprint lingers. As you step back inside your home, you notice the hearth has been stoked again, and the room smells of morning. Not the fresh croissant kind of morning, but the smoky, earthy scent of survival. Your younger sibling is already awake, chewing a hunk of bread the size of their head. The day begins. But in the back of your mind, you're already thinking about nightfall. About when the fire dies low, and the air turns cold again. When the stars return and the shadows stretch across the town. Because in early America, darkness wasn't an absence. It was an event. A communal vigil. A slow parade of fears and routines that shaped entire communities. And when the sun goes down tonight, so begins another round of whispered prayers, clanking watchmen, and hopefully, not another pig in the street. You watch the shadows grow long again as evening tiptoes across the village, settling in with the chill. The sun dips behind the trees like it's sneaking off early, leaving you with a sky that bruises from gold to violet. A dog barks once. Then, silence. This is the moment when people start checking their doors, muttering to themselves, and hoping they remembered to bring in the laundry before it's stiff as a board. Night is coming, and with it, the watch must begin again. Tonight, it's your neighbor Thomas's turn to patrol. He's not thrilled about it. You can tell by the way he straps on his worn-out leather belt and sighs like he's about to head into battle. He grabs his musket, a stubby lantern, and a horn that he'll probably forget to blow if anything actually goes wrong. The musket's more for show anyway, it hasn't been cleaned since the last harvest festival. You nod at him from across the yard. He grunts something that might be evening or might just be indigestion. Either way, the torch has been passed. As the last light fades, Thomas makes his first round, trudging past fences and barns, calling out the hour, 7 o'clock, all is well. His voice cracks halfway through, making it sound more like a question than a proclamation. Confidence is optional, it seems. Here's your mainstream historical fact: in many colonial towns, night watches followed strict hourly announcements, sometimes shouted loudly, other times marked with the clang of a bell. This wasn't just tradition, it was a kind of early public reassurance system. If you heard the call, someone was awake. Someone was watching. You were, theoretically, safe. You settle onto the porch with a scratchy wool blanket wrapped around your shoulders. The air smells like wood smoke and pine sap. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning wet firewood again, and the smoke stings your nose. This, more than anything, tells you it's officially evening. But let's talk about what the night watch was actually like for the poor souls doing it. First of all, it was boring. Mind-numbingly, toe-numbingly boring. Long, slow patrols through empty dirt lanes, staring at silent houses, jumping at every owl hoot. No podcasts. No coffee. Just your thoughts and the occasional rat that scurries too confidently for comfort. And the clothing? Not exactly tactical gear. You'd be lucky to have a wool coat, a scratchy hat, and maybe, boots without holes. If it rained, you got wet. If it snowed, you questioned every life decision that led you to this moment. Historians still argue whether colonial watches were effective deterrents or mostly symbolic gestures. Some records show that theft and mischief still happened under their sleepy noses. Others suggest that just having someone, anyone, on the street helped keep things calm. At the very least, it gave townsfolk someone to blame when the pig got loose again. You glance down the street and spot Thomas swinging his lantern dramatically, illuminating absolutely nothing. He stumbles slightly over a rock. You hear a muffled curse. This is the elite task force keeping you safe tonight. There's a fringe tidbit you might enjoy. In some towns, the night watch was allowed to enter homes if they suspected unusual behavior. That's right, if your candle was still burning at midnight, or if you were laughing suspiciously, they might knock and ask what you were up to. Privacy was less of a right and more of a polite suggestion. You imagine trying that today. Someone knocks at your door at 2 a.m. and asks why you're still awake watching videos about the Roman aqueduct system. It's suspicious, madam. Go to bed. But back then, it was a genuine concern. The night was when sin slithered out of its hiding places. According to sermons and town ordinances, darkness bred temptation. Alcohol, adultery, gambling, devil worship, the whole grab bag of Puritan anxiety. Which meant anyone caught moving around too much after dusk was automatically suspect. You hear Thomas again. 8 o'clock, all is well. A dog barks in return. At least someone's listening. The watch wasn't just about crime, though. Fires were a bigger threat, by far. Wooden houses packed together, open hearths burning all night, candles left too close to curtains. One spark could erase half a town. So watchmen kept their eyes peeled for smoke. They sniffed the air like anxious hounds. And sometimes, they actually stopped disasters. One guy in Boston reportedly smelled smoke at midnight, burst into a bakery, and saved the entire block. Legend says they gave him free bread for a year. Which, frankly, feels like a fair trade. You pull the blanket tighter and glance up at the stars. They blaze overhead, silent, ancient, indifferent. No city glow to drown them out here. You can see the Milky Way, faint and smudgy like someone dragged chalk across the sky. That's your ceiling tonight. A little scary. A lot beautiful. The sound of feet crunching in dirt draws your attention. It's not Thomas. Too light. A young boy, maybe 13, runs past, pretending to be on patrol. He's got a wooden stick for a musket and a rope for a belt. His voice squeaks, 9 o'clock, and still pretty good. You smile. He's practicing. Someday he'll take a real shift. Whether he wants to or not. In some towns, they called it the watch and ward system, night watch, followed by a daytime version that enforced behavior and handled smaller disputes. One rolled into the next, a never-ending chain of community surveillance. That's the thing. Early settlers didn't have privacy, not really. They had presence. You existed in public, in connection. Everyone knew your business. Everyone judged your porch, your fences, your candle habits. And maybe that sounds awful. But maybe, in a world without locks or alarms or street lamps, it was the only real security they had, eyes, voices, and the sound of a tired neighbor yelling, all is well, even if he didn't quite believe it. Thomas walks by again, lantern swinging, coat flapping like a half-dressed bat. He gives you a little salute. You salute back with your mug of lukewarm barley tea. It's not good, but it's hot. The night deepens. The wind picks up. Somewhere, a barn door creaks ominously. You head inside, the blanket still wrapped tight, and latch the door behind you. The house is quiet, warmish, smelling faintly of stew and smoke. You climb back into bed, eyes already heavy. Outside, the watch continues. Not glamorous. Not always effective. But it's there, an imperfect human shield between you and the great, unknowable dark. You wake to a soft knock at the window, not quite a sound and not quite a dream. The cold morning air leaks through the cracks in the wooden walls, nudging you awake the way no alarm clock ever could. Your breath curls out in a visible puff, and your fingers are stiff as you grope for the edge of the blanket. It's barely dawn, and already the night is folding itself away like a secret. You sit up slowly, half listening for any movement outside. Then you hear it, the last call of the watch. Faint, ragged, but there, 5 o'clock, all is well. All is well, huh? Maybe. Maybe not. You roll your eyes gently, then stretch with a creak of joints and floorboards. The watchman's shift is over, and now the village exhales together, like everyone's been holding their breath since sunset. You step to the door, peeking through a crack, and see Thomas, the same reluctant neighbor from last night, plodding home with a limp and a scowl, dragging the lantern behind him like it personally offended him. And here's a fun, fringe tidbit: lanterns used by the night watch often had thick, curved horns instead of glass panes, yes, actual animal horn. When sliced thin and polished, horn could bend the light and survive the cold better than fragile glass. So if your town smelled faintly of scorched beef, well, now you know why. You slip outside and the sky is starting to blush pink behind the trees. It's the kind of morning that feels like it might apologize for the cold later. Chickens are clucking in their sleep. The neighbor's cow lets out a confused groan. Somewhere, a rooster is clearing its throat for the big performance. You stroll toward the center of town, where the meeting house sits in quiet judgment. There's already movement, 2 or 3 folks gathering, rubbing their hands, trading sleepy glances. This is the unofficial changing of the guard, the moment where the night's worries are handed off to the morning's chores. Here's your mainstream historical fact: in many early American settlements, the night watch would report any unusual incidents to the local town council at daybreak: suspicious shadows, odd behavior, or even unattended fires. The watch wasn't just security, it was data collection, 18th century style. If you were spotted doing something odd at 2 a.m., expect to hear about it again by 10. A woman in a heavy shawl whispers to another, "Saw Samuel pacing near the bakery again." The other gasps just enough to feel righteous. Samuel, for the record, does this almost every night. He says it helps his digestion. No one believes him. And so the gossip will begins turning again, fueled by coffee substitutes and the slight paranoia that everyone else might know more than you do. Because in a world without official reports or newspapers, the town's knowledge was passed by lips and glances, whispered on porches and murmured behind doors. Historians still argue whether this informal communication system, rooted in suspicion and communal memory, actually improved safety or simply created a culture of constant vigilance. After all, when everyone watches everyone, are you really safe, or just supervised? As you pass the blacksmith's house, you see a lantern still lit in the window. Odd. He usually snuffs it by now. You make a mental note to mention it casually later, just to see if anyone else noticed. This is how the game is played. You remember an old story told by your grandmother, about a night when the watchman tripped over a sleeping hog in the road and accidentally fired his musket into the town bell. The clang woke everyone within 5 miles, and the pig, apparently, never forgave him. True story? Maybe. But it lives on because someone decided to repeat it, again and again, at breakfast tables and beside fire pits. A lot of the night watch's power came not from what it did, but from what people believed it did. Like the idea that watchmen could smell criminal intent. Or that certain calls, like 3 claps or 2 short horn blasts, meant witches were about. Spoiler, they didn't. But that didn't stop anyone from listening for them. You head back home as the sun begins to stretch across the roofs, turning frost to dew and shadows to footprints. The streets begin to hum with sleepy life, boots thudding, shutters opening, chickens arguing. You walk past Thomas's house and see him already asleep in a chair by the fire, boots still on, face slack with exhaustion. The lantern sits beside him, still faintly glowing. Inside your own house, breakfast is beginning, whatever's left from yesterday, maybe a mush of cornmeal and something pretending to be molasses. Someone's stirring it with a stick. You take a bowl and sit by the fire, where the embers still flicker like tiny angry stars. The warmth seeps slowly into your toes. And even though the night is gone, its presence lingers. You feel it in the heavy eyelids of your neighbors, in the chalkboard notes near the well, in the questions still floating around the blacksmith's lit lantern. Was someone sick? Were they working late? Or was it something stranger? You don't ask. Yet. But you file it away. That's what the night watch does, it observes, remembers, and leaves breadcrumbs of suspicion for the morning to follow. Later, as you head out to tend the garden, you see another neighbor preparing for his shift tonight. He's checking his musket like it's a tool, not a weapon. You nod at him, and he gives you a look that says, "Wish it weren't my turn." You smile, because your turn isn't for another week. But when it comes, you'll be ready. You'll wrap yourself in wool and stubbornness. You'll patrol those darkened streets, whisper, "All is well," even when it's probably not, and keep one ear tuned for the strange and the silent. Because in early America, watching wasn't just a task, it was a ritual. A way to say, "We're still here. We're still trying." And as the world around you stirs awake again, you understand why they did it, night after night, lantern after lantern, step after step into the dark. Later that week, your turn arrives. The sun is setting again with that eerie, reluctant slide, like it's backing out of the room without making eye contact. It leaves you standing at your doorway with a torch in one hand and a vaguely cursed-looking lantern in the other. The wind has a bite tonight, and you're already wondering if you made a grave error by not layering more wool under your coat. Too late now. You head out just after supper, stomach still warm with root vegetables and questionable broth. The sky is in full bruised lavender mode, and the first star flickers above the tree line like a tiny spy. The town's shadows lengthen, pooling around buildings, fences, and barrels that weren't scary until now. Someone's goat makes a noise that could easily be mistaken for a banshee. You hope it's the goat. You whisper the ritual phrase, 9 o'clock, all is well, into the darkness, but your voice barely echoes. The night swallows it whole. This is your first full patrol, and already the weight of silence feels heavier than the musket slung across your back. Which, to be clear, you've never fired. You once cleaned it while whistling, and it went off near the chickens. You still aren't forgiven. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1600s, most towns in New England had mandatory night watch rotations for all able-bodied men. It wasn't a volunteer thing, it was civic duty. Dodge it too many times, and you could face a fine or, worse, community shaming. And shaming in a Puritan village? That was practically a recreational sport. You turn a corner and pause. The shadows stretch impossibly long in the moonlight. You remember the training: walk slow, eyes open, check the doors, don't shout unless you have to, and absolutely no sleeping on duty. The last guy who got caught dozing during a shift ended up cleaning chamber pots for a week, and folks still whisper, "Nap watchman," when he walks by. A chill runs down your spine, and not just from the wind. Because here's where things get weird: night watch superstitions. This is the fringe bit. In some parts of early America, it was believed that certain spirits were drawn specifically to the watchers. Not the town. Not the buildings. The watchmen. They were thought to be magnets for things that slipped through the veil after dark. A certain breed of wandering ghost or restless soul saw the lantern as a beacon, an invitation. To be fair, most folks didn't say that out loud. But they hinted. Told stories. Left little bundles of herbs near the patrol route. Just in case, they'd say, eyes darting like moths around a flame. You clutch the lantern a little tighter now, walking past the silent blacksmith shop. The forge is cold, but you still half expect the anvil to groan. You step carefully, crunching over gravel and dirt, until you reach the well at the center of town. You pause. The water in the well doesn't move, but then again, it shouldn't. It's a still night. But you get the feeling it's watching you back. You tell yourself not to be ridiculous. You whisper, 10 o'clock, all is well, even though you're not sure if it is. Historians still argue whether the creeping fear experienced by colonial night watchmen was rooted in religious paranoia or the very real fear of isolation, cold, and wild animals. Wolves, bears, and even the occasional mountain lion made nighttime patrols far more than just a walk in the dark. And it's not like you could pop on a flashlight or call for backup. Speaking of wild animals, there's a rustling behind the cooper's shed. You stop mid-step, breath caught. The sound is sharp. Purposeful. You slowly raise the lantern, the light catching the edge of a barrel end. A cat. A fat, judgmental cat who clearly doesn't care about your rising heart rate. It glares at you, stretches, and disappears into the dark with the confidence of someone who owns this town. You whisper a not-so-polite thank you and carry on. Each hour feels longer than the last. You announce 11 o'clock, then midnight. The stars above will lazily as if they've got nowhere to be and all the time in the world. You, on the other hand, are starting to feel your knees. You lean against a wooden post near the schoolhouse, trying not to look too pitiful. That's when you see something strange. A flicker of movement near the chapel. You squint. There's definitely something, or someone, there. Just beyond the edge of the lantern's reach. You call out, voice wobbling a little more than you'd prefer. Who goes there? No answer. Of course. You step forward, slowly. The grass crunches underfoot. The chapel's old wooden door creaks slightly in the wind. Then you see it, a figure. Just standing there. Not moving. Barely distinguishable from the tree it's next to. You raise your lantern. The figure blinks. It's a scarecrow. A new one, apparently placed near the edge of the yard for some late-season harvest ceremony. Or maybe someone's idea of a joke. Either way, it almost earned itself a musket ball. You whisper something unholy under your breath and make a mental note to move that thing tomorrow. You continue on, shaken but still standing. That's the unofficial motto of every watchman, shaken but standing. You pass by the tavern, empty now, but the smell of ale and smoke clings to the walls like old memories. You pause for a second and listen. Nothing. No clinking cups or raucous laughter. Just silence. That's the hardest part about night watch. It's not the ghosts or the cold or even the musket that may or may not work. It's the silence. The overwhelming, soul-deep quiet that makes your own breath sound criminal. That forces you to fill the space with thoughts, some sensible, others slippery and strange. You round the final bend, the sky just beginning to hint at dawn, faint gray bleeding into the black. You call out, 4 o'clock, all is well. You don't really believe it. But you say it anyway. Because the town needs to hear it. Needs to believe it. And so do you. One last pass down the main road. One last glance behind the baker's cart, behind the smokehouse, under the stairs at Widow Clark's place. All clear. You return home with feet like bricks, a spine that's seriously reconsidering its arrangement, and a mind full of shadows. You hang up the lantern. You place the musket gently against the wall. And as you sink into your bed, boots still on, coat half off, you whisper once more. All is well. And you almost believe it. When you wake again, it's nearly noon, and the world is bright enough to make you wince. Your legs ache, your back stages a protest with every movement, and your eyelids feel like they've been lightly sanded. But the smell of bread from somewhere down the road pulls you upright. Slowly. One vertebra at a time. Outside, the town's already buzzing. Chickens are outraged at something invisible, a group of children runs past screaming about pirates, and someone's horse is determined to stand in exactly the wrong place in the middle of the road. Normalcy, in other words. You shuffle out the door, and there it is, your reward. A simple nod from the elder councilman, passed along as he carries a bundle of hay. No ceremony, no trumpets, just a single, solemn nod. It says, you did your part. You didn't die. Well done. Honestly, you'll take it. You're still bleary, leaning against a fence post with the grace of a melting wax figure, when Thomas ambles by and smirks. Heard you nearly shot the chapel scarecrow. Word travels fast in a small town. You grunt in response and he hands you a piece of dried apple. Peace offering. You chew it slowly, wondering why fruit that's technically dead can still break a tooth. Later, you hear a strange story from one of the children. The youngest Miller boy swears he saw two lanterns moving side by side out in the woods behind the schoolhouse during the early hours of the morning. Which is odd, because you were the only one on patrol last night. Here's your fringe tidbit: colonial children were often the first to report strange happenings in the night, mainly because they had the best window views and the worst sleep schedules. Some towns even had informal, kid alerts, where a child's nightmare could trigger an adult investigation. One boy's dream of a red-eyed cow led to a full search of a neighbor's barn. No red eyes were found, but they did discover 3 chickens someone had been hiding to avoid shared egg taxes. Scandalous. You dismissed the lantern story. Probably fireflies. Or the boy's wild imagination. Or swamp gas. Or ghosts. Honestly, it's probably ghosts. By the time the sun starts dipping again, you're no longer thinking about lanterns. You're thinking about supper. And warm bread. And maybe a bit of cider, if you're lucky. But as you sit down, a voice calls from outside. You step out and find one of the elders holding a sheet of hand-scribbled parchment. He looks uncomfortable. That's never a good sign. We're adding an extra patrol tonight, he says. Something stirred the dogs. And there was, scratching. You blink. Scratching. He nods. Wooden door. Deep grooves. Too high for raccoons. Too low for owls. You're not on duty again, yet. But we want extra eyes. You nod slowly, heart sinking. Of course. Because you just got your feeling back in your legs. But here's your mainstream historical fact: some towns in the 17th and 18th centuries began experimenting with overlapping watches, where multiple patrollers would cover partial shifts and cross over at certain hours. It was an early attempt at layered security, partly to increase safety, partly to catch lazy watchmen who skipped their routes. Because nothing says community trust like structured suspicion. You volunteer to take a short shift near the granary. You tell yourself it'll be quick. Just an hour or 2. Nothing unusual. You walk the route again. The lantern flickers. The wind whispers through dried corn husks. And that old silence settles on your shoulders like a cloak made of fog. You pass the granary. Nothing but the rustle of rats and the occasional thud of settling grain. You pause. Then you hear it. A long, dragging scratch. It comes from the far side of the granary wall. You freeze. Musket loaded? Probably. Lantern bright? Barely. Your bravery. Circling the drain. You creep forward, step by step, holding your breath. Around the corner. And then. It's a deer. Well, half a deer. Its back legs are tangled in a busted fence wire. It panics when it sees you and bolts, dragging a wooden slat behind it with a painful screech. That explains the marks. And the scratching. You release a breath so loud the deer probably hears it halfway to the woods. You sit down on a crate and let your heart catch up. Behind you, the town is still sleeping, none the wiser. Historians still argue whether events like this, small animal scares, shadowy movements, strange noises, contributed more to real protective instincts or simply trained townsfolk to live in a constant state of edge-of-your-seat anxiety. Either way, you can't deny it works. Everyone's watching. Even when they're not on shift. You finish the makeshift patrol. No more scratches. No lanterns in the woods. Just you, the stars, and the occasional questioning hoot from an owl who clearly judges your flashlight technique. You finally head home, your boots making sticky sounds in the dew-wet grass. Your house is dark and quiet, and for once, the shadows inside feel welcoming. You slide into bed without bothering to undress, and this time, your sleep is immediate, deep, and completely dreamless. When you wake, it's late morning again. Outside, the town is already spinning up its usual chaos. You stretch and smile, oddly proud of yourself. You didn't find anything horrifying. But you showed up. You watched. And in early America, that was everything. Showing up. Watching. Saying, all is well, even when it wasn't certain. Trusting that the world would wobble forward, imperfect but intact, for one more day. Because some nights, the only thing between order and chaos was a tired villager with a lantern and a backbone made of sheer, stubborn routine. And that, somehow, is enough. The next few nights are quiet. Almost suspiciously so. You're not on patrol again, yet, but you find yourself waking in the middle of the night anyway. Not out of fear or noise, but out of habit. Your body, it seems, is now calibrated to night watch hours. You lie there in the dark, blinking at the wooden ceiling beams, counting creaks like sheep. Somewhere outside, a shutter rattles gently in the breeze. A dog huffs in its sleep. You get up and walk barefoot to the window, peering out over the quiet village. A faint mist hangs over the ground, coating everything in a ghostly silver sheen. You should be asleep. But part of you, just a small, deeply stubborn part, still wants to patrol. That's how it begins, voluntary patrols. You're not the only one. A few others, mostly younger folk, a few restless elders, start walking routes outside their assigned nights. Quietly. Unofficially. It's not sanctioned, but nobody stops you either. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In some colonial towns, informal night walks became a tolerated tradition. They weren't part of the mandated watch, but they helped bolster community security. People walking because they wanted to keep an eye on things. Because they couldn't sleep unless they knew everything was still standing. You carry no musket this time, just a lantern and a short stick. Less military, more neighborhood dad energy. The streets are darker tonight. Clouds smother the moon, and everything feels softer, less defined. You walk the path along the edge of the field, past the windmill that hasn't worked in 3 seasons, toward the small creek where frogs perform nightly opera. And there, again, you hear the faint sound of scratching. You freeze. Déjà vu. You listen harder. But this time, it's coming from above. You look up slowly. The Cooper's cat. Perched on a roof beam like some smug gargoyle, scratching its claws into the soft wood and blinking down at you like you've disturbed its art installation. Of course. You shake your head, chuckle once, and walk on. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Colonial watchmen sometimes carried little bags of dried lavender or thyme in their coat pockets, not for self-defense, but to smell in moments of fear. It was thought the calming scent could ward off panic, or ghosts, or both. One particularly theatrical watchman reportedly stuffed his hat with rosemary and claimed it kept his thoughts pure. He also tripped over the same bucket 3 nights in a row, so, purity, yes. Coordination, not so much. You don't carry herbs. But you do carry hard candy. The kind that glues itself to your molars and briefly distracts you from wondering whether that rustling in the bushes is a raccoon or a minor demon. You reach the far side of the creek, where the trees press in a little too close, and pause. The air is cooler here, scented with wet bark and old moss. You raise your lantern, sweeping the light slowly across the woods. You expect nothing. But you see something. Just a flash. A shape darting between trees, too tall for a fox, too smooth for a deer. Gone before you can blink. You hold your breath. Wait. But there's only silence. Historians still argue whether sightings like these were rooted in real dangers, escaped servants, smugglers, wild men, or whether they were projections of the watchman's exhausted imaginations. Either way, reports of figures in the woods appear often in early town records, usually accompanied by vague phrases like indeterminate presence or shadow unconfirmed. You don't chase it. You're not that bold, or foolish. Instead, you mark the place in your memory, whisper a soft, "I saw you," and turn back toward town. When you return, the sky is starting to pale at the edges, a soft inkling of dawn curling up behind the rooftops. The rooster hasn't crowed yet. You smile at the brief, smug feeling of having beaten it. Back in bed, you fall asleep instantly. Your dreams, though, are strange, slow chases through fog, doors that open into nothing, and always that sense of being watched. Not with menace. With curiosity. In the morning, there's a new notice nailed to the church post. All town residents, be advised. The council has decided to expand the official watch schedule to include second shifts on weekends. Volunteers may submit names to Mr. Brewster. Compensation in bread and firewood. You read it. Reread it. And without thinking too hard about it, you walk over and put your name on the list. You tell yourself it's because of the bread. But it's not. It's because part of you wants to know. Wants to keep seeing what happens in the spaces between other people's dreams. You've started to feel oddly protective over these streets. Like they whisper to you now. Like they trust you. And the other part? The part you don't admit? It likes the quiet. Likes being the only soul awake under a sky full of stars. Likes being the keeper of nothing in particular. Just shadows. Just breath. Just the memory of what might have been out there last night. And so, you begin again. Lantern lit. Musket loaded, just in case. You step into the street. You whisper the words to the air. 9 o'clock, all is well. And for now, at least, it is. It's well past midnight now. The sky is a velvet black, and clouds like stray brushstrokes drift lazily over the moon. You're on your second official night watch this week, not counting your little voluntary strolls, and your feet are starting to feel like wood planks strapped to raw nerves. The church bell hasn't rung since dusk, but you swear it echoes inside your skull anyway. That's the thing no one warns you about, silence has a hum to it. After a few nights, it's louder than sound. You walk the same circuit again. By now, the routes have muscle memory. Left at the smithy, pause by the well, right past the tanner's shop where the smell hits like a moral lesson. Then down to the blacksmith's lane, where a single horseshoe always sits forgotten on the ground. You've stopped moving it. It feels like it wants to be there. Tonight, it's colder than usual. The kind of chill that creeps up your spine like a warning. Your breath fogs out in front of you, and your lantern's glow feels smaller somehow. More tentative. Still, you walk. Tonight's your first paired patrol, a new twist in the council's endless quest for innovation. You've been assigned to walk with Martha, who's 3 inches shorter than you, twice as sharp, and allegedly once threw a tin basin at a burglar. And missed. But the man ran anyway, so maybe fear of the second throw did the trick. You meet her near the bakery. She's bundled in an oversized shawl, carrying her lantern like it might bite. "I hate the cold," she mutters. "Thought you hated company more," you say. She snorts. Only when it talks too much. And thus, a partnership is born. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the late 1600s, many colonial towns experimented with buddy patrols, especially in winter. Walking in pairs not only reduced the risk of falling asleep, or freezing in place, but also offered emotional support. Morale stayed higher when someone else was equally cold, miserable, and unimpressed with your musket skills. The two of you walk mostly in silence, punctuated by shared complaints and the occasional whispered joke. You point out the horseshoe. She tells you it's cursed. You tell her that's why you stopped touching it. She shrugs. Wise. But the silence, once comfortable, grows taut. It starts when you both hear something by the mill. A soft dragging. Almost like cloth on stone. You freeze. She lifts her lantern. Together, you creep forward, boots crunching on gravel. The sound stops. You sweep the light over the area, nothing but old crates and the water wheel, slowly turning like it's got nowhere better to be. Martha frowns. Could have sworn. You nod. You both definitely heard it. But the night doesn't offer explanations. Only more questions. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some early watchmen were so superstitious about noises near mills that they carried little charms made of corn husks and string, convinced it would stop gremlins from jamming the wheels. One town in Massachusetts even installed a bell inside the mill that rang whenever the gears seized up, supposedly to alert the spirit world to back off. You and Martha don't have charms. You have sarcasm and a slight limp from stepping on something you hope wasn't a snake. You move on. At the edge of town, there's a fence that marks where wilderness begins. Past that, the forest is thick and indifferent. Trees grow close together there, and the wind whistles through them like a warning. You pause by the gate. Ever wonder what's out there? Martha asks. You glance sideways. Nope. She laughs, soft and surprised. Liar. You grin. Only a little. You both listen. Nothing moves. But the air feels aware. Historians still argue whether these edge-of-town moments, standing just at the threshold of the unknown, shaped colonial fear narratives. Was it real danger? Was it the human brain inventing monsters from branches and wind? Or was it something older, deeper, a primal suspicion of darkness with no visible end? Either way, you both take one step back from the gate. Just in case. The rest of the watch is quieter. A stray dog noses through someone's laundry. An owl blinks at you like you've intruded on its business plan. Somewhere, a drunk man sings very poorly about potatoes. All normal. You and Martha circle back to the center of town. She pulls out a flask and offers a sip, something sharp and herbal that burns the cold right out of your ribs. Same time next week, she asks. You pause, then nod. Sure. Because despite the silence, despite the weird sounds, despite the ache in your legs, you're starting to feel something strange, comfort. Like the town is leaning on you, and you're not entirely crushed under the weight. When you finally get home, the sky is blushing with early dawn again. The birds are just waking up. You kick off your boots, crawl under the blanket, and realize you haven't thought about monsters in hours. You sleep like someone who's earned it. The next week moves in a haze of cold mornings, damp afternoons, and the constant, steady rhythm of town life. The occasional patrolling shifts return to their regular monotony, walking the same streets, glancing at the same buildings, pausing at the same old mill to make sure the gears are turning. But something shifts inside you. A small, subtle change. Maybe it's the crisp air of the early mornings, or maybe it's just the act of walking with someone, Martha, mostly, but for the first time, you begin to see the town differently. The edges, once blurred and unremarkable, now hold more details. The grain silo's shadow. The abandoned wellhouse with its rusted bars. The small creek that runs through the corner of town where you swear you once heard something, or maybe that was just the wind. You find yourself walking longer distances. Not out of duty. Not because you have to. But because the quiet feels important. Like it carries a weight. And the town, even in the dead of night, has this life to it. A pulse you only really catch when the rest of the world is asleep. Your shifts are uneventful. No strange sounds. No shadowy figures in the woods. Just you, the lantern, and the occasional chirping of a tired cricket. Here's your mainstream historical fact: the idea of night itself became a subject of increasing anxiety in early America. Colonial folk, still largely bound to natural cycles of the day, thought night was a time when otherworldly forces, spirits, witches, wild men, came to life. Most townfolk didn't feel comfortable being outside after sundown unless it was for work or watch duties. Those long, dark hours were a time of suspicion, and you could feel the tension even as you passed through the shadow of the general store at midnight. That's how you end up back at the old churchyard again, glancing at the markers as the night air presses in around you. You could swear the gravestones are more crooked than they used to be. More uneven. Or maybe that's just your tired eyes. You can't help but stare at them, the names worn away by time. You pause by one that's half buried under ivy. You're about to lean in closer when you hear something behind you. A soft rustle. Then a creak. And then, a whisper. You freeze. The wind is low tonight. So low that every tiny sound seems amplified. But this isn't the wind. You turn slowly. No one's there. Your lantern sways slightly in your hand, casting flickering shadows over the gravestones, and you tell yourself it's just your imagination. Another trick of the dark. You're starting to think that maybe it's a side effect of all the late-night walking, the way the silence starts to press in, like it's an extension of your own mind, bending at the edges. You shake your head and move on. No need to linger. Not tonight. You're not scared. Not really. You're just tired. You've been doing this for weeks now, patrolling in a pattern that's become almost familiar. Almost safe. But then you hear it again. A scratching. At the edge of your hearing. This time, you don't pause. You don't hesitate. You break into a quick pace, sweeping your lantern in front of you, illuminating the ground as you move. No one's ever told you what to do when something like this happens. They just say, keep walking, but what are you supposed to do when the shadows seem to stretch like they know you? When every step you take on these old cobblestones feels like you're stirring up something that shouldn't be disturbed. It's probably just a rodent. Or a raccoon. Maybe an owl. It could be anything. But you still feel it, like something's watching. Listening. Waiting. And you keep walking, forcing your muscles to obey, your feet to keep moving forward. As you turn the corner near the baker's shop, you pause again, the lantern light swinging wildly in your hand. The cobbled street is empty. Silent. It's still. Too still. Historians still argue whether the act of walking, especially through the night, carries a psychological weight. You muse quietly to yourself. Some think it can shift the way people experience their surroundings. The townsfolk of early America, after all, didn't just see darkened streets. They saw layers of history in every crooked fence post, every stone in the road, every hollow that might hide an outlaw or a monster. But tonight, you don't see history. You see the present. And the present? The present feels like it's on the verge of shifting. You take another breath, steady yourself, and keep walking. But your mind starts to race. Was it just the wind? Was it just the shadows that made you think you saw something dart across the street? You shake your head again. No. There's nothing here. But the feeling lingers. Even when you pass through the farthest corners of town, past the stable, past the windmill, past the gnarled tree where the kids once carved their initials, you know something's different now. You've seen enough, heard enough, felt enough. The town is too still. And something about it feels like it's holding its breath. You head back toward the churchyard. This time, though, you don't stop. You keep your eyes ahead, focusing on the warmth of the lantern. You want to get home. You want to sleep. But when you pass by the old stone wall, you hear the softest of whispers again. A voice. Low. Unfamiliar. Leave now. You stop. You look around. The streets are empty. The air is cold. No one else is out here. But that whisper. It was real. It came from behind you. And before you can even think about turning around, the voice fades into nothing. You don't wait. You start walking faster. The lantern wavers in your hand, casting a weak glow over the road. Your feet don't carry you fast enough. You can't move quickly enough. And just as you reach the corner of the last building, you hear one final whisper, close to your ear. Leave now. Your heart pounds in your chest. You don't look back. You just move. You push your legs harder, until the streets start to blur past you, and the sound of your footsteps is louder than anything else. And as you cross the threshold of your house, the door creaks behind you, closing you off from whatever might have been lurking out there in the night. But it's not over. Not by a long shot. It's the kind of morning where you can't shake off the cold, even though the sun is already fighting its way through the clouds. Your legs ache from the long patrols, but it's your mind that's heavy today. The whispers from last night keep coming back, playing on repeat like a broken record. You don't want to admit it, but something about that voice felt real. And that unnerves you. It's one thing to hear a rustle in the bushes, something easily explained away. It's another to hear words. Clear, sharp words. It wasn't your imagination. You know that much. Something spoke to you. You try to push it down. Tell yourself it was just the wind. The loneliness. The eerie calm that sometimes comes in the dead of night. But there's that feeling again, the one that presses down on your chest, like the town is watching you. Watching and waiting. You pour yourself a cup of tea, hoping the warm liquid will calm the unease in your gut. The steam rises, curling in the dim morning light. You stare at it for a moment, letting your mind wander. Last night feels like a fever dream now. But then, that's how the stories go, isn't it? The ones people whisper about, the strange things that happen only in the dark. The things that never quite make sense. You finish your tea, dressed, and head to the square. There's a message on the church door about another shift, more patrols. More hours. The council's trying to keep the pressure up. A bustling town needs more vigilance. And when you see that notice, you don't know whether to sigh with relief or frustration. Historians still argue whether people were truly more paranoid during the colonial period, or if their vigilance reflected a real threat. You muse to yourself as you walk past the blacksmith's shop, the sound of hammer on anvil ringing in the air. It's a familiar sound. Something that belongs to the day, not the night. But still, you can't escape the feeling that there's something more to all of this. The town seems the same today, quiet, routine. Everyone going about their business. The old mill creaks as the water turns the wheel, and the street is empty except for the occasional passerby. But it's not the town that's on your mind. It's what happened when the sun went down. You find Martha at the bakery, grabbing her evening bread. She eyes you, noticing the weariness in your steps. You look like you didn't sleep, she says, raising an eyebrow. You shrug. Late shift. Her smile is small but knowing. I heard you were up late last night. Some folks say they saw you pacing near the old churchyard. You stiffen at the mention of the place. That voice is still fresh in your memory. You don't want to talk about it. Don't want to admit it's bothering you. But Martha presses. You all right? You're not spooked, are you? You can't help but laugh, even if it's a bit shaky. Spooked? No. Just tired. Aha. Sure, she says, not buying it for a second. Well, if you ever need backup, I'm happy to walk with you. Even the bravest of us get a little twitchy now and then. It's a small thing, but her offer brings some comfort. It's easy to forget that you're not the only one out there in the dark. In the quiet. The idea of walking with someone else is, frankly, a welcome thought. Still, you smile and change the subject, asking her if she's heard anything strange on her shifts. Nope, she says, shaking her head. Same old creaks, same old shadows. Just the usual. But the way her eyes flicker toward the street, toward the town's edge, tells you she's not so confident about it either. You both know. You've both heard the stories. You return to your patrol after the brief chat, your pace a little slower now, your steps a little more deliberate. This time, you don't hear any whispers. There's no shadowy figure darting in the corner of your eye. But as you pass the old stone wall again, you pause. There it is. That feeling. It's not the wind, not the shadows. It's something else entirely. Something that's been there all along, like a pressure you've only now become aware of. You keep walking. This time, however, you pay close attention. You're looking for something. Something that doesn't belong. Something that could explain all the weirdness that's been creeping up on you lately. And that's when you see it. The thing that's been there all along, hidden in plain sight. A small, tattered scrap of paper pinned to the stone wall. No one else has noticed it. You know that for sure. You tear it down, your heart pounding a little faster than it should. The ink is faded, but it's legible. The words are written hastily, as if the writer didn't have much time. It reads, "Leave. It's not safe anymore. We never left." The message isn't signed. There's no return address. It's just, there. For a moment, you don't know whether to laugh or run. It's either some kind of joke, or something far darker. You fold the paper carefully and slip it into your coat pocket, your thoughts racing. For now, you tell yourself, it's just another oddity. Another mystery. It could be nothing. Or it could be something much worse. You walk faster. Toward the center of town. Toward the light. But as you do, you can't help but wonder, if you didn't see this tonight, what else would have gone unnoticed? You barely sleep that night. You try, you really do, but your mind won't stop running. Every rustle of the wind outside, every shift in the shadows of your room, brings you right back to that scrap of paper. Leave. It's not safe anymore. We never left. It echoes through your thoughts like a chant, and you can't shake the feeling that it's meant for you. For now. You try to rationalize it. It's just some prank. A warning from some misguided soul. Maybe someone who got it into their head that the town is cursed. But you know, deep down, that it's not that simple. The town has its mysteries. Everyone knows that. But this? This feels different. Feels like something's waking up, something that's been lying dormant, maybe for centuries. The morning comes, and you force yourself to go through the motions. You make your breakfast, tend to the usual duties. But your mind keeps drifting back to that scrap of paper. When you make it to the square, you notice the town seems quieter than usual. Almost too quiet. The usual bustle of people is muted, like everyone's suddenly holding their breath. You see Martha at the bakery again, but today she doesn't offer a greeting. She's standing at the window, staring out toward the woods on the edge of town. Her face is pale. "Martha," you ask, walking up to her. She turns to you slowly, her expression blank. Then, her eyes flicker to the churchyard and back. I don't know what it is," she whispers, her voice unsteady. "But something's off today. Have you seen anything strange?" You can tell she doesn't want to say more, but her anxiety is palpable. You hesitate, but decide not to bring up the note just yet. Instead, you nod and change the subject, asking if she's had any unusual encounters while on her patrols. "No," she replies quickly, "but there's been a lot of movement around the outskirts of town. People say they hear things at night. Sounds that shouldn't be there." You don't have to ask her to explain further. You already know. It's the same thing you felt. The tension. The almost unnatural quiet. It's as if the whole town is holding its breath. You don't want to alarm her further, but the weight of what's happening presses on your chest. You're both in over your heads, and you don't know how much longer you can pretend it's all just coincidence. You sure everything's alright? You ask, trying to sound casual. But your voice betrays you, the uncertainty creeping in. Martha doesn't answer right away. She just stares at you for a moment, as if weighing whether to tell you what's been on her mind. Finally, she sighs. There's something about the old churchyard. I mean, the whole town has a feeling to it, doesn't it? Like we're all part of something that happened a long time ago. Something we weren't meant to understand. Her words hit you harder than you expect. You felt that too. That same creeping sensation, like something was waiting. Something you couldn't quite grasp. It's as though the town has been built over something ancient. Something hidden, buried just beneath the surface. Historians still argue whether colonial settlers' obsession with the supernatural influenced the layout of towns or whether it was simply a byproduct of their isolated, superstitious lives, you think, trying to make sense of it all. Maybe it's both. You try to shake off the heaviness in the air and start your patrol, but the whole town feels different now. It's not just the weird note. It's not just the unsettling stillness in the streets. It's something deeper. Like a force that's been lying dormant for generations, waiting to awaken. You can feel it, pressing against the edges of your consciousness. As you walk past the churchyard again, you find yourself slowing, your feet dragging for the briefest moment. The church looms above you, its shadow stretching across the square. Something about the place unsettles you more than it ever has before. It feels ancient, like it's seen things that it doesn't want you to know. You wonder how long it's been there, how many generations of settlers have passed by, maybe unaware of the strange power it might hold. And as you stand there, something catches your eye. A movement. A flicker near the church door. You squint, but it's gone in an instant. It could have been a trick of the light. Or it could have been something more. You press forward, but that feeling doesn't leave. The town feels more like a trap, like it's wrapping itself around you tighter with every step you take. The whispers seem louder now, not in the streets, but in the air itself. You can almost hear the breath of the town, waiting. Watching. Later that evening, you're walking home when you see the shape again, a shadow darting between the trees on the edge of town. You freeze, your heart pounding, and instinctively, you call out. But there's no reply. Just the stillness of the night, thick and suffocating. You step closer, your hand resting on the edge of your lantern. Your mind races. It could be an animal. It could be a trick of your tired eyes. But it's hard to convince yourself when the air feels charged, like a storm's about to break. And then, from the trees, you hear it. A laugh. Soft, barely there. But unmistakable. It's the sound of someone, something, watching you. You spin around, heart hammering in your chest. But there's nothing behind you. Nothing but the cold, empty street. You swallow hard and keep walking, your pace quickening. The hairs on your neck stand on end. The town is still waiting. And you can't shake the feeling that you've been part of something much bigger than you ever imagined. Something that's been lurking beneath this quiet town for far longer than anyone has known. The next morning feels just as suffocating. The sun is up, but it might as well not be, the weight of the past few nights hangs thick in the air. You can't shake that feeling that something is circling you, this town, its history, and that strange, haunting laugh. It feels like the whole place is waiting for something. You don't know what, but you feel it. You pull yourself together and head to the square again, though everything inside you protests. Your footsteps echo louder today, like the cobblestones beneath your boots are more aware of your presence. Everything feels too real, like the world is pressing in from all sides. Martha's there, standing outside the bakery again, but today she's not watching the woods. She's looking directly at you, her eyes tired, strained. As if she's seen something you haven't, something she doesn't want to admit to herself. When you approach, she doesn't greet you with her usual cheer. Instead, she just raises an eyebrow, clearly waiting for you to say something. "You heard that laugh too, didn't you?" You ask before you can stop yourself. Her gaze drops to the ground, and for a long moment, she doesn't respond. You wait, the tension between you both thickening with each passing second. Finally, she speaks in a low voice, almost too quiet to hear over the bustle of the morning. "I don't know what it is. I don't know if I want to know. But, yeah. I've heard it." Her eyes flicker up to meet yours. "And I'm starting to think we've been living in a town built on lies." Her words hit harder than you expect. It's not the fear that bothers you, it's the weight of her tone. The way it feels like she's finally come to some realization, one that's too big to ignore. "I don't think we're meant to understand everything here," she continues, her voice cracking just a little. "I think we're part of a story. A story that doesn't end the way we want it to." You feel a chill run down your spine. She's right. The town's never felt normal. But you didn't want to admit it. You didn't want to accept that everything could be part of some larger, darker scheme. You didn't want to think that the town could be built on something sinister. Historians still argue whether towns like this, settlements that emerged from the wilderness, were simply born out of necessity or whether they were meant to hide something, you think, your mind trying to latch onto something logical to push back the discomfort. But even that doesn't help much. The more you try to reason with it, the more real the fear becomes. You feel your breath catch in your throat as you look back at the church, standing stoic at the heart of town. Something about the place has always been off, but now it feels like the whole structure is watching you. The way the stones are stacked, the way the shadows cling to its sides, they seem deliberate. Designed. As though it's a sentinel, standing guard over something buried deep underneath. You try to shake it off, but the images keep piling up in your mind. The scrap of paper you found yesterday, the laugh you heard in the dark, Martha's words, they all form a puzzle you can't solve. The pieces don't fit, and yet you can't shake the feeling that they must. You're about to ask her more questions, but something stops you. A movement in the distance. At the edge of the square, a figure appears, an older man, thin, with a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. He doesn't belong here. You can tell immediately. Martha notices him too, her face going pale. She starts to speak but falters, her voice unsure. I think that's Mr. Hale," she says, her gaze narrowing. "He hasn't been seen in years. Not since he disappeared." You both watch as the figure steps closer, his movements deliberate, slow. He looks straight at you, and for a moment, you feel like you're being pulled into his gaze, like he can see straight through you. He doesn't say anything at first. Instead, he pulls something from his coat, a small, weathered notebook, and hands it to you, his fingers shaking slightly. "Take it," he says, his voice raspy, almost a whisper. "You'll need it. Don't ignore what's coming. It's already here." Without another word, he turns and walks away, vanishing as quickly as he appeared, blending into the shadows of the buildings. You stand there, holding the notebook, your heart racing. What in the world just happened? Martha is silent beside you, her face a mask of confusion and fear. "I don't know what to think anymore," she admits quietly. "Who is he? Why did he leave us that?" You open the notebook, your hands trembling as you flip through its pages. The writing is old, faded, and disjointed. At first, it doesn't make much sense. But as you scan through it, you start to see patterns, cryptic lines that repeat themselves over and over. There's one phrase that stands out, "The watchers never sleep." You shiver involuntarily, the words haunting you. What do they mean? The watchers? What are they? Your thoughts whirl, and you close the notebook with a snap, stuffing it into your coat. You need to get back to your house, back to safety, but you know that the town is already drawing you in. You're not going to be able to escape this easily. The watchers are waiting. And now, it seems, they're watching you too. You're back at your house now, but it feels like you're not really there anymore. You sit at your kitchen table, the notebook heavy in your hands. Every time you try to focus, your mind flashes back to the figure in the square, to Martha's shaky voice, to the words on that paper, "The watchers never sleep." It's like the town itself is pressing in on you, getting closer with each passing second. You try to distract yourself. You make a cup of tea, you sit by the window and watch the shadows stretch across the yard. But nothing feels the same. The walls of your house seem thinner, as though the town is seeping into your thoughts and your very bones. The notebook is still on the table, waiting for you to dive deeper into it. You hesitate. Something about it feels wrong. Like you're unlocking a door that should stay closed. But you don't have a choice. You need to know. You open it again, and this time, you're more deliberate. You flip through the pages slowly, your fingers brushing over the brittle paper. The writing is strange, fragmented. But there's a pattern to it. The more you read, the more you start to make connections. It speaks of an ancient order, one that existed long before the town was settled. The Watchers. They were here before the first stone was laid in the churchyard, before any of the settlers arrived. They were the ones who kept the town in check, the ones who watched. You come across another passage that sends a chill down your spine. When the blood of the old and the new is mingled, the Watchers will rise. Blood. The old and the new. You swallow hard, trying to make sense of it. What could it mean? You turn the page in haste, desperate for something to tie it all together, but your hands freeze when you see what's next. A sketch. A drawing of the church, but the image is distorted, like something's been scribbled over it in a rush. And in the sketch, there's something moving. In the shadows of the churchyard, barely visible, there are figures standing, watching. Tall, cloaked figures. Their faces are obscured, their outlines sharp and unsettling. The drawing is so precise, so real, it feels as though you could step right into it. Your heart races as you stare at it. The figures in the sketch look just like the shadow you saw near the church. They're real. They've been here all along. Watching. Suddenly, a loud bang comes from outside. You flinch, the sound jarring in the silence of the house. Your pulse quickens, and you get up to check the window, your breath shallow. The street outside is empty, but you can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is standing just out of sight. Watching. You turn back to the notebook. There's more, but you're already feeling dizzy, overwhelmed. Your mind is racing in circles, trying to keep up with everything, but it's too much. It's too real now. The Watchers, the strange notes, the figures from the past. It's all coming together, and the weight of it is unbearable. The town is alive, and it's not a peaceful, welcoming life. It's a hungry one, and it's watching you closely now. Waiting for something. Waiting for you. You grab the notebook and shove it into a drawer, locking it away. It feels wrong to keep it out any longer, but you can't help the pull. You know you'll return to it. You have to. As night falls, the sounds outside become more pronounced. The wind picks up, howling through the trees, but there's something off about it. It doesn't sound like the wind should. It's like it's carrying voices, whispers. You can almost make out the words, but they're too faint, too far away. You pull the curtains tighter, trying to shut it out, but the shadows stretch long across the room. Every creak of the house seems amplified now, like the very walls are groaning under the pressure of something unseen. And then you hear it again. That laugh. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. It's coming from somewhere close, too close. You freeze, your breath caught in your throat. There's no one outside, nothing in the yard, but you feel it. It's like the laugh is in the house with you. You stand up, your heart hammering, and move to the door. You need to get outside. You need to run, to leave, to escape this creeping madness. But when you open the door, the air hits you, and it's thick. Heavy. Like something's changed in the town, something ancient has stirred, and it's starting to wake. Your footsteps are tentative at first, but the street seems strangely empty. The houses around you are silent, their windows dark. It feels like a dream, one of those dreams where you're trapped in a loop, unable to escape. You don't know where you're going, but you know you can't stay in the house anymore. You can't stay in the town. The watchers are here, and they've been waiting. Waiting for you. As you reach the square, you see the church again, standing like a silent sentinel in the distance. And in front of it, the figures are there. Standing still, waiting. Watching. The shadows stretch unnaturally long, as though the night itself is bending, conforming to some ancient will. You can feel it in your bones, a deep, gnawing pull that you can't resist. It's drawing you closer. You've always been a part of this town, a part of its story. And now, it's time to face whatever it is that has been waiting for you. The cold air seems to wrap around you as you approach the church, your steps growing heavier with each one. Every instinct is screaming at you to turn back, to run, to leave this place behind. But you can't. It's like something is pulling you in, some invisible force keeping you anchored to this spot. The figures in the shadows remain motionless. You can barely make out their features, but you feel their presence, pressing in on you like the weight of the entire town itself. They're waiting. Watching. You stand frozen, heart racing, your mind a whirlwind of questions. What are they? Why are they here? Are they even real? A soft rustling sound breaks the silence. It's not the wind this time, but a voice, low, barely a whisper, as if the very air itself is speaking to you. You strain to hear it, your body tense, your breath shallow. The time is near, the voice says. It's not one voice, but many, layered on top of each other, as though dozens of people are speaking through a single breath. The watchers will rise. The blood of the old and the new will mingle, and the town will belong to us once more. The words send a shock through your entire being. The watchers. The blood. The town. You don't know what it all means, but you understand this much: something is coming. Something terrible. And it's connected to you. You take a step forward, barely aware of your movements as your feet carry you toward the church. The figures remain still, their eyes fixed on you as you draw closer. The air grows heavier, more oppressive, and you can feel the weight of centuries of history pressing down on you, suffocating you. At the church's door, you hesitate. The wooden door creaks in the wind, and for a moment, you're sure it's going to open on its own. But it doesn't. You reach for the handle, your hand trembling as you grip it, and you pull. The door opens with a low groan, revealing the darkness inside. It feels like stepping into another world, one where time doesn't exist, where reality bends and warps, and where you can't tell if you're awake or asleep. You step inside, the door closing softly behind you, leaving you in absolute silence. The air is thick here, heavier than it was outside. It's like the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for something. The smell of damp stone fills your nostrils, and you can feel the cold seep into your bones. The church is just as it was when you first saw it, ancient, weathered, and untouched by time. But now, it feels wrong. As though it's not just a building, but a living, breathing entity. And you can feel it watching you. You turn to look at the altar, and your breath catches in your throat. There, in the center of the room, is a figure. It's not one of the watchers from outside, but it's something else entirely, something old. Something powerful. It's an image you've seen before, etched into the pages of the notebook. The same tall, cloaked figure, standing in the shadows. But this time, it's real. Standing right in front of you. The figure doesn't move, but you can feel its presence. It's there, in your mind, in your soul. And you understand now. The watchers aren't just out there. They're here, inside you, inside everyone who's ever lived in this town. They've been waiting, watching, for centuries, for this moment. You don't know what to do. You want to scream, to run, to escape. But your legs are frozen, your feet glued to the cold stone floor. Your heart pounds in your chest, and your mind races, trying to make sense of it all. And then, just as quickly as it came, the presence begins to fade. The figure in front of you recedes into the shadows, disappearing as if it was never there at all. The air lightens, the oppressive weight lifting from your chest. You're alone again. But you know it's not over. You know that whatever has been waiting, whatever has been watching, is still here. Still watching. You stumble back toward the door, your breath ragged, and when you step outside, the figures are gone. The square is empty again. But the town, this town, has changed. The air is thicker now, charged with something you can't explain. The watchers are still here. And you've seen them. The truth is out now, and you can't unsee it. The town isn't just a place. It's a story, a living, breathing story, written by those who came before. And you're a part of it, whether you want to be or not. As you stand there in the street, the weight of it all settling on your shoulders, you feel something shift. The ground beneath your feet trembles, and the wind picks up again, swirling around you. The watchers are waiting. And now, they're waiting for you to make your next move. But you don't know where to go from here. You don't know how to escape. You're trapped in this town, in this story, and you can only hope that, somehow, you'll find a way to survive. The laugh comes again, distant but close enough to send a shiver down your spine. But this time, it doesn't frighten you. It feels more like a warning. A reminder that the watchers never sleep. And neither will you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.